the body. So this is, we usually call this the Dhamma top. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what is the Dhamma? Well, most people understand the Dhamma, or at least Buddhist people do. When you see the Dhamma, they say, well, that's the teachings of the Buddha. Well, okay, then what did the Buddha teach? The Dhamma. What is the Dhamma? Well, Dhamma is a loaded word. It means a lot of things. Actually, in the widest sense, it means everything in existence. But more specifically, in terms of the teachings concerning the practice of meditation, that in fact, the whole teaching of the Buddha is centered around the Four Noble Truths. So the Buddha had a very powerful experience of enlightenment. And then some people have had experiences, mystical experiences, and they say, oh, I saw God, or God is talking to me, or, I experienced cosmic consciousness and all that. The Buddha didn't immediately say that. He actually said, I understood suffering. I understood the cause of suffering. I understood how suffering can be brought to an end, and how a person can live, think, and meditate, it would bring suffering to an end. So that was the Buddha's sort of take on spiritual life, rather than trying to get into some mystical experiences. He wanted the people to really understand the nature of their mind. And essentially, the Dhamma the Dhamma is also can be related to the laws of nature. And these fundamental laws of nature, the first one is sort of like the law of its gravity, or the law of karma is one of these fundamental laws of nature. Some people think that, karma, that's something that Buddha invented, or some kind of Eastern philosophical mumbo jumbo and so on. But no, actually it's a very, you could say, a scientific understanding. Similar to the law of gravity. If you throw something up, what happens? Here on Earth, though, right? Not on the moon. Okay. Okay. So anyway, the law of gravity. So the law of karma is like that. If you throw something out of your mouth, some kind of word, it goes out. It mingles with the bodies and minds of other people, and comes back to us. In Newton's law. The law of gravity and Newton's law are very kind of similar in relating to this law of karma. So every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you throw something out of your body, like if you flip somebody a finger, right? You might get a punch in the face, or worse. And if even your thoughts are like radio waves. And those thoughts go out in the world and mingle, goes through other people's minds, although this is not on an unconscious level, and cause some reaction in another person's mind that will then come back to affect us in one way or another. And so that law of karma is one of these natural laws, but one of the main aspects of the practice of the Dhamma. And so if you put out negative energy, you get negative energy back in return. And what is negative energy? Well, from the Dhamma point of view, it's thoughts and actions motivated by selfish greed, and desire and greed for things, as well as the opposite, aversion and hatred for things. So greed and hatred, when we put out these kind of thoughts, then unpleasant reactions come back to us. But it's not only greed and hatred, but also the opposites. So if we put out in the mind, we put out thoughts of friendliness, kindness, generosity, selflessness, and all these wholesome qualities, then we also will get back, similar types of vibrations to us, or at least not suffering coming back to us, but more peaceful vibrations. And then also delusion, ignorance. That means not knowing the truth. So it's not knowing the truth about the mind. That we've allowed our mind to get tightly wound up and bound up and intricately, like a ball of string that's been batted around by a cat. I'm all tangled up. Or somebody with long hair, if you go out in a strong wind and you come back, your hair is all tangled up and matted. Anybody ever have that? So that's sort of like the tangle of the web of karma that our mind has woven in with the external world. That's called, we call that the web of karma. And it's simply because we haven't understood the real nature of the mind and consciousness. And actually this question was brought to the Buddha by some devas. Some devas are like angels sitting on a heavenly being. And but anyway, they came down to the Buddha to ask him a question they'd been thinking about for a long time. And they said, the inner tangle and the outer tangle. This world is entangled in a tangle. So I asked this Master Gotama, who succeeds in disentangling this tangle? And so the Buddha's reply was that a person who's standing on the ground of sort of moral conduct or harmless conduct, mental discipline, and who develops concentration and wisdom, they succeed in disentangling this tangle. So the inner tangle and the outer tangle, that refers to, of course, the outer tangle is all the myriad of sensory vibrations out in the world, or all the various sensory objects, sights, sounds, smells, taste, body feelings that are constantly coming through the senses. When the person looks around and they see basically in one turn of the head, you can see hundreds of different visible vibrations and objects. And depending on where you are, you're also hearing many, many, many sounds going on, even in the space of 10 or 15 seconds. Or also, depending on where you are, a lot of smells and tastes. And also when you're in a room full of all kind of people, then you're hearing all kind of different things, and the mind is, reacting to some, avoiding others, and getting tangled up, reacting to them. You hear somebody talking about, oh, they're for Trump, and you react, no. And they go over and argue. So they're getting entangled with others. They're getting entangled in various objects that cause them discomfort or pain or pleasure. So that's the tangle of the external world. And then the tangle of our mind that has created all of its interactions and loves and hates and sorrows and the whole gamut of emotions that's tightly involved in all of these various objects from the distant past and bringing them up to the present, and then getting more involved, projecting them into the future even. With the things that haven't even happened yet, we're worried. Oh, is that going to happen to me? Oh, what's going to happen? The things that are not even here yet, right? So this is what is called the inner tangle and the outer tangle. And that's what our mind is basically caught in. So that's one of the most important aspects of the teachings of the Dhamma. And especially in related to the cause of suffering. Look, every person suffers, but every person is also seeking happiness. Don't you think? It's the drive of all living life to find and live in a state of happiness, or at least well-being. And even a tiny little ant, a tiny little ant crawling around the ground. If you stick your finger down in front of the ant, what would it probably do? Stop or go around or go back? Why? Because it senses some danger there, right? You look at a tiny ant compared to your finger is like us standing at the base of the Empire State Building, right? So if that all of a sudden came crashing down in front of us, we would get scared too. So when something that tiny is a little ant, there's something very alive. There's something very aware, and which is life force itself, and something very conscious. And it's seeking happiness. That's all an ant is doing, is just trying to find something to eat, take it back to his den, and, or any other creature. Look at your pet cats and dogs. They're also seeking happiness. They get scared of pain. So even the human beings. Now look what's happening in Ukraine. All this terror that people's minds are going through. So anyway, coming back to this essential aspect, but how has the mind become entangled in this tangle, the karmic tangle? So that was, and the Buddha spent his whole life, 45 years, traveling all over northern India, teaching people how to disentangle this tangle. And the Buddha's teachings on the Noble Eightfold Path is the way that he taught the method for learning how to gradually disentangle this tangle. Now, how many people have ever had a ball of string or a ball of thread that had so many knots in it, and you didn't even know where to start? You have to start with one, right? The closest one. You start, and you have to kind of gradually lift the part of it up, and gradually get and put something in, and you undo that one, and then you can undo another one, and then another one. Well, it's similar to the nature of our mind. We have to start out with working at the, you might say, on the grossest knots. But in order to do that, we have to be able to see the knots. Now, I think a lot of you wear glasses, right? Even I do. If I want to read, I have to put on my glasses. Because without the glasses, I can't see that very well. I mean, to read. Or even to do a simple thing like to untie a knot, I've got to put on the glasses, right? So, in the same way, trying to see the knots in our mind require also a very powerful pair of glasses, because our normal vision is distorted. That means is distorted by ignorance. And so we have to learn how to, magnify the glass lens. I mean, people who have trouble reading, basically it's a magnification of the lenses, right? You have like if you're farsighted or nearsighted, you put on the glass, it magnifies, so you can see it clearly, right? So that's exactly what meditation is. In order to see clearly, we have to focus our mind. We have to become more concentrated. It's that concentration aspect of the meditation that helps to bring the objects more in focus. But more about on that a little bit later. But I wanted to come back to even a more fundamental aspect about the suffering, is that it's, as I mentioned this morning, that our mind is normally running between the past and the future. And all of our problems in life are problems of the past and future. Try to think of any problem that you might have, or that you're thinking about into the future, or any problem that you have that's not connected to the past or future. Go ahead, I'll give you a few seconds. Think of any problem that you have is not connected to the past and the future. But what if your mind was resting in the present moment? Then there's nothing to remember. There's nothing to desire or have aversion to, because there's no past or future connected with the object. And that's why in meditation, when we, one of the main aspects of meditation, the first level of meditation, is to bring the mind, try to let go of the past and future and regain that connection to the present moment. When we say present moment, a lot of people don't present moment. Don't understand what the present moment is. But it's actually a vibration of consciousness. We'll get more back into that later. But and actually that present moment awareness is the natural vibration of consciousness. It's a natural, the natural, I don't know how else to say, the vibration of consciousness. And it's also the mind and the body were born at the same time, according to the Buddhist idea about how people are born from rebirth. That when the mother and father produce the two XY chromosomes and create the first little one-celled organism. At that time, consciousness comes and becomes implanted in that organism. And then that organism spends about 9 months in the womb undergoing cell division from a one-cell organism to a multi-billion or even trillion cell baby in the space of 9 months. And with each cell division, that awareness, that life force or awareness goes into each of those succeeding cells. So following that train of thought, basically every cell of the body has awareness. And they're all connected in what we call the inner internet. That means within the body, the nervous system is like a web, and all the cells of the body are connected to that nervous system, like an internet. And they can communicate with each other. When your toe feels something, it alerts the brain. Then they can understand what needs to be done. It triggers off something else that goes down and rushes down to the toe and tries to help it. Or if you cut your finger, so that there's natural intelligence in the body. And also from that 9 months in the womb, the mind was basically just in the present moment. That awareness was simply in the present moment, feeling that surge of life force and that evolution. And so basically the mind and the body were intimately interconnected. Then in the time of birth, when the baby comes out, the baby's mind is also still in that sort of present moment awareness. Many of you mothers probably, could relate to that. And even child developmental psychologists are saying that for about the first 6 months of a baby's life, it has a kind of an oceanic awareness. It was very kind of expansive. It wasn't kind of set behind the eyeballs and a little me looking out of the eyeball. It was more expanded. And the baby's mind didn't have any really discriminations within it. Now, it might have been, it felt pain, of course. It was dropped or some other natural thing, some pain, and it might cry, but that's basically an animal instinctual level. Looking around and hearing things, it didn't have any sense of, I like this or I don't like that, or any other, didn't know the names of anything. But little by little, that changed. And then the sweet grandmother comes by. Or no, first of all, they give the baby a name, right? You have to give the baby a name. The hospital demands a name. So they start calling it little Johnny, little Susie. And the relatives come over and start holding it and giving it all this attention. And then little by little, what used to be a very wide open and expansive awareness, present moment awareness, gradually starts coagulating or condensing kind of behind the eyeballs. Then the baby begins to get this sense that it's seeing things out there and that it's different from the things out there. You start calling it its name and it starts to look. And then it starts to learn language. Oh, that's doggy, that's kitty, that's daddy, that's mommy. And it starts, these perceptions in the mind now are having some meaning. Then the grandmother comes by with the first chocolate for the baby. And as a taste of the chocolate and a pleasant feeling gives the baby a pleasant feeling. Then it starts to identify the face with a pleasant feeling. And then it starts to hope. I hope that face comes again in the future because it's connected with a pleasant feeling. The idea of a pleasant feeling. And if the uncle or the father holds the baby too tightly and hurts the baby, then the baby might have aversion to that object, that face. Then it starts to think, I hope that face doesn't come again in the future because it's expecting an unpleasant or painful feeling. Or if the cat goes by and the baby reaches out and grabs the cat's tail and the cat turns around and scratches, and the baby gets a pain, it might start having a fear of the cat. Or so many other things. And that's actually the birth of the past and future. That's how the past and future are born. A lot of people, when you talk about past or future, they don't really even know what it is. But actually, it's a mental state that's created within the mind based on wanting pleasurable sensations in the future and avoiding painful sensations in the future. So call it the tug of war between pleasure and pain, or the pleasure and pain syndrome that the mind is caught into. And this is the start of that tangle. The inner tangle, the mind starts getting tangled up with the outer tangle of so many different objects. And that also takes the mind of the baby out of that present moment. And it starts hoping and thinking about the future and not wanting the painful objects of the past to come again in the future. So it loses that connection with the body. It starts thinking about the future. Who's going to come tomorrow to give me something? Or who's going to come tomorrow and cause me pain again? So that takes the mind out of the present moment. And that's actually the birth of suffering. And to use a kind of a desire, a simile, although I hope I don't get criticized for that, but the Christians have the idea of Adam and Eve, right? Or you've all heard the Adam and Eve story and how they got kicked out of heaven because of their desire, to mate and so on. So that was the original sin, right? I'm just saying it because it's very popular in various situations. Don't get me wrong. So in the same way, that happens in our mind when we lose that connection, that present moment centeredness in the body and starting looking outside of ourself for pleasure, and then having the fear of pain. Because when the mind was in the present, it was perfectly contented. But when it loses that natural connection to the present moment, it has to substitute that natural pleasure or happiness of the present moment. It has to substitute it now for substituted pleasures, or these externally, something we bring into ourselves. Rather than that natural pleasure and joy bubbling up from the vein, so to speak, or within the cellular vibrations itself, we have to bring pleasure and pain from the outside, especially the pleasure, but bring that into us. And we're also recreating that pain of remembering the past. And that comes because we've been disconnected from the body, and we don't know anything about the mind. We don't understand how the mind works. And when we become disconnected from the body, then we also lose the natural intelligence of the body. We lose that sensitivity of the body. We're no longer grounded in the body, feeling the subtle vibrations. So we also become disconnected from the natural intelligence, and we interfere with that natural intelligence. Now, just give a simple example. Let's say a young person start to, because they see their friends or something, maybe start to smoke cigarettes, or maybe vaping now is a better thing. Anyway, they pick up these habits. And then after a while, let's stick to smoking because that's probably more dominant. And then they start smoking because they want to fit in with the crowd. And then after some time, their body starts. So what's the body trying to tell it? That's not good for me, right? But the mind doesn't listen because the mind is so greedy for that pleasurable feeling that comes from whatever it might be, let's say the smoking. When the person starts to light up a cigarette and the mind's trying to tell it, don't do that, don't do that. But the mind says, shut up. So we've interfered with the natural intelligence of the body. And now then we get sick, we have to go to a doctor and ask him how to heal us. Because we've lost that ability to heal ourselves. And that can be applied to quite a number of things. And like getting the proper type of exercise, doing deep breathing. And hardly anyone ever, tells us about that. Even doctors, lung doctors, how many of them, actually told you to practice deep, slow breathing? Probably not too many. Or practice yoga exercise. Everybody's about, cardio, right? Pumping out the cardio. But, yoga exercise is a different kettle of fish. It's not interested so much in cardio, but it's interested in life force circulation by making the joints, keeping the joints flexible and the muscle tissue pliable and so on, so that the oxygenated blood and life force can really permeate into all the cells of the body. So anyway, coming back to this idea of being disconnected from the body, that's really the start of the problems. And almost all the problems that we have are problems of not being mindful. Most of the accidents that we get are because we're not grounded and centered and relaxed in the present moment. Our mind is in the future. You're rushing down the street, to do something, not looking where you're going, and your mind is in the future, and you step in a hole and twist your ankle, or worse, wander in the street and almost get hit by a car. Or even driving cars, people that are driving, but they're lost in their mind, thinking about this or that. not really paying attention, not being awake, and get in an accident. Virtually every accident that happens to us is because we're not centered in the present moment. Take a common example. Cutting your vegetables for your meal, right? You have a sharp knife and you're cutting something. Then your mind is caught up in being angry with somebody who insulted you last week, or having some erotic lust for somebody, and you cut your finger. The knife slipped because you weren't paying attention. So these kind of things happen all the time. But it's because we've lost that centeredness, that present moment attention. And because we've lost that connection with the natural happiness of the present moment, or that contentment of the present moment, and then we're having to get objects to fill that void of happiness. And while doing that, we infringe on the happiness of others, or we do those unwholesome actions that I mentioned about the law of karma. We might kill, steal, lie, cheat, rape, pillage, and plunder, all in the name of satisfying your desire, or keeping away what you feel is threatening your desire. So actually all anger and hatred comes from desire. Because anything that threatens our desire, that's what we have anger or hatred for. That's why in the Buddhist teachings, if you're probably ever reading them, it says, how many have read that? Desire is the source of suffering. Anybody ever read that? Craving or desire. What about hatred? Doesn't that cause a lot of suffering? Again, because hatred arises from the desire. And the desire for a certain person to want to, get more land, or get more and more things, and anybody who's in the way, they roll over them with army tanks. So that's why this is the interconnected phenomenon. This of being disconnected from the present moment, being disconnected from the natural source of contentment and mental well-being, and then having to then rely on the external world for our well-being. And if we don't have the means to satisfy that lawfully, we'll go to unwholesome ways of getting it and infringing on that law of karma. And, getting caught up in greed, hatred, and delusion. That's very important to kind of understand how that all arose in the mind and how it continues. And that's really what the practice about the meditation is, and that's the Buddhist perspective on it. And in his teachings about the meditation, it's about learning how to turn our attention inwards and start unraveling all those knots of karma, or untangling that tangle of greed, hatred, and delusion that's within the mind. And so the essential cause of suffering is basically deep within the mind. And But most people, when suffering happens, what do they normally do? They blame others for their suffering, don't they? When something happens to you. Oh, that person coughed in my face. Or that person, came and got in an accident. We're always trying to shift the blame for our problems to others. They insulted me. Sure, but there are two levels of suffering. One is the circumstantial cause of suffering. And that could just be kind of anything. A trigger from the outside. Somebody insults you. But then the substantial cause of suffering is actually within the mind. It's the accumulation of greed, hatred, and delusion. And of course, the selfish, egoistic kind of thinking and preoccupation with oneself and one's opinions and ideas, and strongly clinging to our ideas of what is good or bad, or what is wrong or right, and so on. And that then comes into conflict with others. So it's because of ignorance, it's because of not understanding that essential true nature of consciousness, or the present moment awareness, which is the natural peaceful vibration within the mind. Most people know nothing about it. Did your parents tell you anything about that when you were younger? Did your doctor? Did even your psychologist? Did the President of the United States tell you that? No. Why? You'd think. So the problem is that most people are not, interested in that real, deeper levels of truth. And even like Western science, they want to find the beginning and ending of the universe, don't they? Did you all read about that? They're sending out these probes, to Mars, beyond the Voyagers, going out solar system. They want to find out, how the universe started, or the end of the world. Or they're sending missiles up to planets, trying to blow them apart, or meteors to get some rocks, and then bring them back down and examine them and try to find out what was the exact point in time when the universe was created. Now, the Buddha wasn't interested in that. But he was also interested in the beginning and ending of the world. It's very interesting. So scientists, Western scientists, I know there's a scientist in here, don't get offended if I trample on your toes a little bit. Some scientists want to find out the beginning and the end of this material world. But the Buddha was interested in finding the beginning and ending of the mental world. The difference. So there's an interesting story. At the time of the Buddha, there were some celestial beings, some of the deities, as I already mentioned. And these deities have a lot of power, and they can, in one stride, they can cover 100 miles in one sort of stride. So they can travel very fast, And so one of these devas got up in the morning and said, I want to find the end of the world. And so he started walking and going here and there, trying to find the end of the earth. or the heaven, or going to the heavens, trying to find the end of the world. He'd go to different meditation masters and ask him, how do I find the end of the world? They would scratch their head and they'd say, go ask the other guy. So this Deva went to many different spiritual teachings, and they gave him the same answer. Go ask the other one, because they couldn't answer. Finally, one of them says, go ask Mahabrahma. Mahabrahma was the great God who was supposed to have created the world, in some religious text. So we said, that's a great idea. So we went up to the realm of Mahabrahma, and the Mahabrahma was giving a talk to all these sort of his lesser God children or disciples or whatever. We went up and asked him, I want to find the end of the world, please. You created the world. Tell me, how do I reach the end of the world? And he said, shh, don't speak so loudly. My disciples might hear you. I don't know. Go ask the Buddha. Brahma telling this Deva to go ask the Buddha how to find the end of the world. So he says, I just left the Buddha. So he went back down to earth and came to the Buddha, told him the story, and the Buddha was laughing and chuckling and said, my dear Rohitasa, you're not going to find the end of the world by physically traveling. And that's when he told him that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this 5 or 6 foot long body, with its nervous system, memory, and consciousness. And so that's how the Buddha approached that subject. That means understanding how this tangle of ego-centered consciousness is arisen. Because the baby's mind at the time of birth, until it's several months old or longer, as I already mentioned, doesn't have a sense of an I there. You might be calling it a name, but it still doesn't have any sense of an I or that's me until a little bit later on. Until little by little it starts formulating, and there's a little nucleus seems to be centered behind the eyes. He looks down, that's my body, yes. That's somebody else's body. So that's called dualistic awareness, or the ego-centered consciousness. But that was created in the mind. You weren't born with that. It's not the natural vibration, the present moment vibration. We've created that. And that is how the world is created, the world of multitudinal objects. There's me here facing this big world out there, and all these things coming at us. And we're having to dodge all these things, and we're having the desires and aversion, and having created this tangle. And we don't know how it happened. And no one is telling us how it happened. That's what makes it even worse. Except for somebody like the Buddha comes by and, sit down here. Sit down there and just watch your breath. So anyway, so how does one succeed in disentangling this tangle? And we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. But in terms of the meditation practice, the starting point is learning how to bring the mind back to get it reconnected to the present moment. I've already been talking about that. So using the breathing and the body for that anchor, because it's the only thing we have. It's the only thing that we have with us from the moment you were born to the moment you die. This breathing body is the only thing that you have that's reliable. You can immediately, anytime, just stop and feel, and it'll be there. Your brother or sister is not always going to be there. Your mother and father are not always going to be there. Your grandparents are not always going to be there. Your friends, your dogs and cats and everything else is not going to be there. But your breathing body will be there until the moment you die. So actually, it's your best friend in that sense. It's the only reliable thing that stays with you. Everything else leaves you. Of course, at the moment of death, it's going to leave you too, but at least during this life, that's the only thing that you can count on that will be there. So we have to develop a different kind of a relationship to it. Not seeing it as just something we do to satisfy our desires and aversions and all kind of other things. We have to use it to see it as our lifeline to sanity and our life preserver to the present moment, where we can then start clearly disentangling this tangle. And that's why the Buddha cultivated in the meditation practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness as a way. In fact, he said that when he was giving this teaching, he said, monks, this is the direct way to the overcoming of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. For, or entering the direct path to freedom. And that was these 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it's a gradual development of our awareness. But going from the outside inwards. So most people have outside. That means everything they see is outside of them, basically. And they're always looking outside, right? But in insight meditation, the practice of the mindfulness is insight. That means we're directing our attention inward. And then going gradually inward through all the untying the knots, little by little, until we're able to come to that essential, deepest level of awareness, the untangled awareness. But it starts with the body. When the Buddha was teaching meditation, the Buddha was, I like to call him the original scientist. Because he wanted to know what is the cause of suffering. But he sat down and he went inside to try to discover the cause of suffering. And that's when he realized it was because of, when he untangled all the knots, he came to that present moment, pure present moment awareness, which is beyond self and others or me or I, and is that ultimate state of contentment that's not needing anything. That's how we saw that as the end of the suffering. So the Buddha took up the meditation like a scientist. How many of you have taken science lab in college or universities or high school? Can you remember that science lab when you went in there and there were some microscopes on some tables? You notice anything about that? There were very heavy tables that were normally bolted to the floor so they couldn't be moved. And the microscopes were also bolted to the table that couldn't be moved. Because if you look down through the microscope and somebody keeps jiggling the table, it's going to be very difficult to see what you're looking at, isn't it? It's like glasses, it'll be fuzzy. So in the same way, the Buddha treated this body as the laboratory. So if you're going to the science lab, first you have to find the door of the laboratory, isn't it? First day of school, right? And say, lab 101, yeah, that's down this way. So you have to go down and actually find the door of the laboratory. You can't just watch the door of the laboratory, right? You have to open the door, and you have to go inside, and you have to sit down at the microscope, and look down in there, and then start turning up the power of the microscope. So that's exactly what the Buddha did in his quest for discovering the nature of suffering. He sat down, and that's his very instructions, meditation instructions are to find a suitable place to meditate and to keep the back, cross the legs, and to keep the back erect. And the Buddha didn't mince his words. There's a reason for everything he said. Well, why did he say keep the back erect? Any idea? You ever see a Buddha statue like this? I've actually seen one a very good one. So that's because of the nervous system. And that's because he understood how the mind and consciousness is affected by the body. So anyway, so keeping the body erect and then being mindful of the breath. And so first we have to find the external body. And the mindfulness of breathing helps to do that. In the first stage of meditation, we have to bring our mind from the external world, or lost in the past, in our thoughts, and to find the external body. Find it sitting on the floor. That's why I say the first part of meditation, feel your butt pressing the floor. Excuse my French. It's not French. But anyway, so, that's the outside body. Feel your hands touching together. Feel the clothes touching the skin. Feel the glasses sitting on your face. That means you have to first find the body, the external body. Then breathing in and out. Feel the expansion and contraction of the abdomen and chest, or if you're focusing here, the touch of the air, it touches here, it goes into the lungs. But anyway, all of those points are first you find the external body. And you keep your attention there. And then the longer you're able to just remember, like this breathing in, sitting, breathing out, sitting, and keeping the mind there, then gradually you start feeling subtler sensations, like turning up the power of a microscope. Now you're starting to feel underneath the skin. First you might have only felt the that pressure on the skin from the touch and so on. As you keep the attention there, you start feeling subtler little sensation. And the same with the breath. As you keep the attention focused on the breathing, you start to feel more and more subtle sensations connected with the breath. Like in this morning's meditation, when you were doing the meditation this morning, could anybody feel those, where the sensations of the clothing touching the skin of their stomach or rib cage or chest? Could you follow that? There were many different little sensations. The longer you kept your mind there, you say, oh, there's some other subtler. And so that is, getting under the skin. Now you've gone from the outer body now to the inner body. You feel the sensations that you're not normally aware of. You go around the whole day wearing your clothes, but unless it's real hot and you feel sweaty, you might not notice the clothes touching your skin very much, right? If you sit down and you just, boom, oh, it's right there, isn't it? So that's what I call a subtler sensation. That means normally we're not aware of these things because our mind is normally distracted and full of thoughts and looking outside. At the moment you just pause and bring your mind there, it's not rocket science, and just keep it there for just a few minutes, you start to immediately, this change in perception happens. You start to feel these subtler sensations. And so the longer you keep your attention there, that means developing your concentration without the mind getting lost in the hindrances, then that's how you start developing a deeper and deeper awareness. But as I mentioned this morning, the main hindrances that are trying to block our meditation are, anybody remember? Let's say this morning when you were meditating, what was the worst hindrance you had, or the most common one? How many, just raising your hand, how many had the most problems with drowsiness or sleepiness? And how many people had more problems with discomfort or body irritations or pain? And how many people had more problems with their thoughts, wandering thoughts? Some people raise their hand twice. 3 times. So there's a new disease in the Dharma health book. Nowadays in the medical health books, they have the books that list all these different diseases, right? Well, there's a new one called MHA. They have ADD, right? There's MHA, multiple hindrance attack. That's for meditators. So that's why the mindfulness is important, is that when you're more attentive and grounded and have developed some concentration, you'll be able to see these hindrances more clearly before they've carried you away. How many people were trying to just watch remember sitting, breathing, or feel their sitting and breathing, and before they knew it, they were lost in their thoughts or were asleep. Like, you didn't see it coming, right? Is it? You didn't see it coming? That's because these hindrances are very clever, like the cat, right? And so they come up without us knowing it. And if we're not grounded in the body, then they take us away before we even know it. But if you're more grounded and alert in the body, when you saw that head coming down, immediately, Chin-drupa. And you could self-correct right on the spot, lift the chin back up. Or reestablish that inward curve of the lower spine. And when you're sitting straight, it's almost impossible to go to sleep. It's only when we allow the head to come down, and that's when the sleep process starts. Or maybe you don't go totally asleep, but the mind enters a kind of a limbo area where it's not really awake. It might feel like you're meditating, but it's not a very high level of meditation. At the moment you start kind of straighten back up, it's almost like pulling on a light bulb in your brain. So that's why anyway the Buddha those instructions about keeping the back straight, even before watching your breath. It's his first instruction is cross the legs and keep the back straight. And then mindfully breathe in and mindfully breathe out. Knowing when you're breathing in a long breath, knowing when you're breathing out a long breath, knowing when you're breathing in a short breath, knowing when you're breathing out a short breath. So that's the clarity, the clear comprehension. And you don't confuse an in-breath with an out-breath. So it's only that as you gain the concentration, that's why in the instructions I gave, I was even, pay attention to the 4 phases of the breath process. The in-breath, the brief pause, might just be a microsecond, but still you can notice. And then the outgoing breath, the brief pause. And then seeing how each breath is different. Sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. This is what is really part of mindfulness of breathing. Is developing that kind of clarity that comes with the concentration. So anyway, that's why that's really that kind of the first stage of the meditation process. And we have to overcome those hindrances, but the best way is by getting grounded in the body, and that's where you can. When thoughts start to arise, you see a thought before you become carried away in it. A lot of you, said you got carried away in your thoughts you didn't see them coming. That's because your attention isn't grounded deep enough. Because thoughts are arising at the cellular level of the unconscious mind. So they're arising like the water bubbles at the bottom of a river or a lake. You've seen water bubbles kind of rise up, right? They're coming up and then they break on the surface. And we only see the bubble of our thought as it breaks on the surface of our mind. We don't see how it's very subtly coming up because our mind is not deeply grounded. So that's why when you're able to ground the attention and start feeling the subtle sensations, then your attention is now brought down closer to that level where thoughts are arising. Then you'll see that thought when it's still weak, in a weak state, and just the mindfulness thinking would be enough to kind of knock the wind out of that thought. And it would just sort of vanish like a water bubble. These thoughts don't have any real substance to them. They're just like water bubbles. So anyway, that is how we start this process of gradually disentangling the tangle. And also an important part of it is being aware of pains. Some of you raised your hand when I asked you about if you had any people who were disturbed by pains. So it's important to learn how to endure a pain and not to be afraid of it. We want to immediately get rid of it. Because every time we try to get rid of a pain, that means also like to rub an itch that comes up and have an itch on it. How many times a day we do that kind of thing? Anybody ever count up the number of times you kind of touch some part of the body out of trying to get rid of an irritation? Probably quite a revelation. And even when you blink, you ever thought why you blink? Because there's an irritation in the eye and you're trying to get rid of it by blinking. You don't know that, of course, but when you stop and look at it, you'll say, yeah, actually, that's true. So, in meditation, while you're doing the breathing and the main object of the present moment is just remembering and feeling the sensations connected with the breathing and the body. But while you're doing that, these irritations are going to arise because there's billions of cells in the body and they all produce sensations. They interact, they rub into each other, they're interreacting, they're producing all these types of irritation, itchy feelings, biting, stinging sensations. Almost an infinite variety of type of sensations you can feel. But basically, it's all just the vibration and interaction of the cells and molecules. What else could it be? So we learn to observe that irritation, and you have to ask, who is irritated? I don't like it. It's bothering me. It's preventing my meditation. So it's the ego that's getting disturbed by it. But anyway, we try to endure those irritations longer, and that's why the emphasis on trying to keep the body still and not move. Gradually endure the amount of time you can sit. Will gradually start disentangling that tangle. Every time you resist the urge to, want to touch your body or head or, to remove some irritation, or, doing all this, trying to find the most comfortable position. Every time you do that, you strengthen that habit pattern. And you strengthen the aversion. But every time you resist it, you just observe it and observe that sensation, observe that mind kind of, that aversion, but telling yourself this will pass, it's not permanent, this will change, and you learn to endure it for another couple of seconds or another minute or two. And even though it's kind of, irritating, at least you're not trying to remove it. And then you see all of a sudden it vanishes. Maybe you decide at last, okay, I'm going to forget that Bhante is crazy. I'm going to scratch this. And you get ready to, lift up the hand to scratch, all of a sudden it disappears. Before you've reached it, it disappeared by itself. Now you don't have to scratch. Now you wasted energy lifting your arm up for nothing. That's the beauty of impermanence. And that's one of these other laws of nature, that everything is impermanent. And if you give things a couple seconds or a couple minutes or a couple of hours, it's going to change. If you just learn how to sit and relax and develop patience and endurance without reacting, everything will eventually change. But people are impatient because of the habit of always wanting things quickly, thinking that everything has to be reacted to. That's how the mind and body has got all entangled in the tangle. And so that's really the first aspect of disentangling the tangle, is to resist learning how to observe pains and not to give in to them. But we're talking about starting with the easy one, like these minor little itches or other irritations, just, they're annoyances, and It's just become a habit. But none of those are going to kill you. And when you actually learn to observe it, you can actually enjoy observing it. You can actually get some joy out of, observing an itch and how it builds up to a point where you're relaxing around it, and you see how you didn't get into it, and you get very happy about it. But anyway, these are all just different things to incorporate that come up in the meditation, and that it shows that it's the mindfulness that's important to see these irritations and hindrances when they're still in the weak stages, so that you can establish that mindfulness, which means a detached observation. So the mindfulness, as we mentioned before, means keeping the mind in the middle. And that means not going after the various things that are coming through us. Learning how to watch. So you're watching the breathing coming. Breathing in, breathing out, sitting. Breathing in, sitting, breathing out, sitting. And so you create this kind of just watching space. There's the body sitting and breathing. It's just the body sitting and breathing. Don't cling to it as my body. This is a body sitting and breathing. That's actually an aspect of mindfulness. Oh, this is just a painful sensation. So what? This is just a sound going through the ear. So what? Why do I have to get angry about it? So this part of the mindfulness, this is part of also the investigation of Dhamma, the reflecting on what is happening to us from moment to moment, but from the Dhamma point of view, in developing this ability just to watch, but without sort of reacting to it. And you see how all these things just come and go on their own, and the mind is able to stay within itself and experience this tranquility. It's there in the middle. Things are trying to attack us, but we've like created an invisible barrier around us, a protective barrier around us, which is the mindfulness and wisdom. Things are trying to attack you, but the mind is not being baited by it. And that comes through the concentration. So anyway, this is basically what I wanted to talk about in this Dhamma talk, because it's really the essence of the meditation practice. Until you can at least get to that first level when you're able to stay grounded and centered and create that kind of a buffer zone between the awareness and the sensory stimulations or your thoughts that are trying to drag you away. That's how you develop concentration. That's how the mind stays there in the present moment longer and longer, and that's the state of concentration. Concentration means the mind resting in the present moment. It doesn't necessarily mean totally absorbed in one particular object. That's the popular idea about it. Absorbed concentration, but it's not the concentration that the Buddha talked about. The mind in the present moment means resting in the present moment within its own nature. It doesn't need an object. We use an object to develop concentration because the mind is not concentrated. But once we become concentrated, the object is no longer important. The mind is resting there by itself. And so that That is ideally, especially at least in the mindfulness tradition and in the practice of mindfulness and the Vipassana type of meditation, this is the kind of concentration we're looking to develop, not trying to get absorbed in some abstract sort of hypnotic state, so just blank out and not to be aware of the world. You're still aware of things, but you're no longer being disturbed or bothered by what is going around you. So that is really the first deep level of meditation, keeping the mind in it. Okay? So if any of you have any questions that might have come up from that talk or in the meditation, then you can write them down on the cards in the tea room or during your breaks later. Write address and yeah, and for those who are listening on Zoom, you can also, when you come back this evening before 7 o'clock, there's going to be a break between about 6 and 7 or when. But anyway, you can, when you come back on later in the evening or whenever it comes to your mind, you could write it down in the chat box. So, stand straight. Relax your arms at the side. Gently close the eyes. Feel the eyes and the socket. Turn on that inner webcam of awareness. And focus it down where your feet press the floor. Feel that weight of the body pressing heels, balls of the feet and toes on the floor. Sort of imagine that 100 pounds or more of body over the feet. And feel the straight legs over the feet, like tree trunk. Feel the clothing touching the skin of your legs, the outer body. We're finding the outer body, finding the laboratory, the door of the laboratory. Feel your hands and fingers. You can feel that subtle warmth in the hands and fingers. A subtle and tingling sensation. Personal blood. And feel the weight of the arms hanging from the shoulders. Relax the shoulders. Feel the clothing touching the skin of the shoulders, arms, chest. Feel the head balanced on top. Raise the chin up to keep the chin level, parallel with the floor. Feel your lips touching together. Feel the dryness or the moistness on the lips. Feel the tongue in the mouth. When you touch your teeth, the roof of the mouth. Then feel the sensations on your face, the prickling sensation, tightness of the skin stretched over the front of the skull. Skin on the forehead, nose. Again, just feeling the eyes, and the eyelid stretched over the eyeball. You feel those subtle eye movements, the blood pulsing in the capillaries of the eye. Even while you're feeling those inner subtle sensations, at the same time you can also just hear sound vibrations in the external world. The mind's very powerful. Feel the inner sensation at the same time as hearing external sound. Let the awareness expand from the eyes to feel the outline of the body, standing body. Try to hold that outline of the standing body in the mind's eye. Just let the sensations from all over the body emerge in the awareness. You don't have to look for them. They're always there. Just be awake. Standing. Standing. Then begin some deep, slow breathing. Go in the air from the lower lung up to the middle, to the top of the lungs and chest. Hold the air in a couple of seconds. Feel that subtle sensation. And feel the relaxing out breath. And the last bit of air going out of the lung. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. And breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. You can almost feel the whole body just breathing in and out. When the lungs expand, they push muscle tissue out of the way that sends rippling sensations through the whole body. The same on the contracting out breath. We feel that dynamic aliveness in this breathing body. And those sound vibrations are going through this body, causing some reaction. The reactions in your thoughts, reactions in the deeper nervous system. If you can, just try to imagine it or feel it, just reflect on the nervous system of the body, every cell in the body connected in that inner internet. And all those vibrations you're feeling from the feet to the head and all points in between. The vibration of present moment awareness. Now we're just going to do a couple of those exercises that we've already done before, but generate more sensation. On the next in-breath, raise the hands over the head, arms, interlock the fingers. Turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back, bend back a little bit. Feel the sensation. The out breath, turn the palms down, touch the head. Again, in breath. Stretch upwards, bend back a little more. Out. Third time, hold that upward stretch longer. Release the fingers, out breath. Feel those sensations in your hands and fingers. Opening the door of the laboratory, going inside, and feeling the subtler sensations under the skin. Turning up the power of the mental microscope. In the next in-breath, pushing up on the toes again, arms over the head and stretch up. Out. In. In. Then we'll do the head turning. When you're doing the head turning, try not to move the body or the shoulder. Just pivot the head on the neck vertebrae, unless you have a particular problem with the neck stiffness. On the in-breath, turn the head to the right, look over your right shoulder, and keep the eyes closed. On the out-breath, all the way back to the left, look over the left shoulder, In-breath to the right. Left. In-breath right. Out-breath left. Next in-breath, let the head stop in the center. Feel the whole body. Standing. Standing. Okay. Go ahead and sit back down. Drink a little bit of water, but don't gulp the water. Actually, my yoga teacher said we should drink our food and eat the water. That's the meaning of that. Drinking the food means you chew the food thoroughly, that it becomes like liquid, and you just sort of swallow it like a soup. Eating the water means you leave the water in the mouth for a few seconds and run your tongue through it a few times, so it gives time for any nutriments in that water to absorb through the nerve terminals. In this meditation, just try to remember some of the things that we were discussing in the Dhamma talk. And bringing the mind back to the present moment. Begin to spend the first minute or two just with the internal video camera awareness. Start on your own, just move your attention slowly from the head down to the body, down to your feet, and back up to your head, feeling all the different sensations. Just as you would use a regular handheld video cam to scan the countryside, just hold that awareness in the mind and move it steadily down from the head down to the feet and back up. Feeling the clothing touching the skin and other sensations, panning downward. Eventually getting down to feel where the buttocks press the seat. Start to feel the right and the left buttock sensation. Feel some sensations in the whole groin or pelvic region. Feeling the hands and fingers. Feeling the way the knees are bent and the feet underneath. And feel your toes. See if you can feel the outline of individual toes, where the toes touch together. It's turning up the power of the mental microscope. Just letting the thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. Keep the camera lens focused in the body. Kind of begin moving back upwards. through the body up to the top of the head. Feeling the clothing touching the outer body, and the subtler sensations under the skin. Be alert for any unpleasant or irritating sensation. How they attract your attention. Coming back up into the head. Feel all those different sensations in the face and head. Just try to hold that outline of the sitting body in the mind's eye. Just coming back to that basic present moment awareness. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Within this larger breathing body, the breathing process is going on. Tuning in to the subtle expanding and contracting sensation. And take a few more deep, slow breaths. Help stay more awake, grounded. Being aware of the whole expanding in breath from beginning to end, and the pause. The whole contracting out breath from beginning to end, and the pause. After the in-breath, hold the air in the lung 2 or 3 or even more seconds. Feel those subtle sensations. You still have a lot of wandering thoughts. Try counting your breaths from 1 to 10 again by yourself. Try to develop more concentration. To challenge, you get lost from your counting. Start again at 1. It's like a little game. You don't always want to get lost. You have to start again at 1. You count the breaths from 1 to 10 without the mind getting lost. It's really the first real stage of concentration. Until you can do that, there's probably not much success in going deeper. If the sounds are disturbing the mind, just focus on the sound. See how many sounds you can just coming and going, constantly changing through the awareness. That body-centered awareness. The arise, change, cease. It's like all the sensations in the body, the breathing, sounds, thoughts, constantly coming and going. That space of breathing body awareness. You can stay in touch with those subtler inner sensations, and thoughts and sounds cannot disturb you. Be alert when irritations arise, see the urge to want to move. Just watch the urging. You just watch the urging, the wanting, without thinking about the object, the urging or wanting vanishing. From time to time, come back and take a few deep, slow breaths to re-energize the nervous system. The mind is getting dull, too many thoughts. Especially be alert for those sensations of pleasure or pain. Mind wanting pleasure, wanting to get away from pain. Keeping the mind in the middle. Seeing each moment as it just arises, lasts a moment, vanishing. Sensations, thoughts, sound. Let's continue sitting longer. You can, if you're getting benefit from that. If there's too much pain or the mind is drowsy, mindfully stand up, continue in standing awareness. And for the next half an hour until the yoga session starts, just continue either sitting or standing or walking. You go to another part of the house and do walking, or if you want to go outside, it's not too windy for you, go out and stand in the fresh air, do some walking. Whatever you're doing, just always just reminding yourself, what is this body doing right now? It's trying to feel whatever position it's in. Be able to mentally feel that outline. The body, however it is, what it's doing. It's like having a constant video camera on. Continue meditation as long as you can. Then at home, try to follow that evening yoga session that I sent out. There's a link. And we'll see you back at 7 o'clock.